The most insane punishments used on women in Nazi camps. The worst punishments imaginable were meted out to all Jews by the Nazi dictatorship, men and women alike. But both Jewish and non-Jewish women were frequently targets of the regime's ruthless persecution, which occasionally targeted victims specifically for being women. Polish women, Gypsy women, and physically disabled women were all targeted by Nazi ideology. Inmates were often beaten and humiliated in early concentration camps, which were characterized by torture. Moreover, denying people access to amenities was a common tactic used to torture and control people. Eager to know more about these insane punishments? Well then, stay tuned till the end of this video. Early concentration camps were not intended to be used permanently, and those in charge did not want to kill their inmates. Nonetheless, the majority clearly disregarded the well-being and health of their prisoners. The conditions under which those detained in 1933, the bulk of whom were alive, were horrifying and brutal. There was a deficit of amenities like heating, beds, and restrooms in practically every camp. When these were available, hundreds of prisoners typically had to share them. The majority of the camps also required hard and taxing forced labor, like agricultural labor. Female prisoners were housed exclusively in specific camps, as well as particular sectors inside the concentration camps. The SS created Ravensbrück, the largest concentration camp for women in Nazi Germany, in May 1939. By the time Soviet troops liberated Ravensbrück in 1945, more than 100,000 women had been imprisoned there. To house female prisoners, SS officials built a facility in Auschwitz-Birkenau, 1942. SS transferred convicts from Ravensbrück were among the first inmates. In 1944, the Bergen-Belsen Camp Administration constructed a women's camp. During the final year of World War II, the SS transported many Jewish female inmates from Ravensbrück to Auschwitz to Bergen-Belsen. When carrying out mass murder operations, the Germans and their allies spared neither women nor children, whether they were Jewish or not. Regardless of age or gender, the total elimination of all Jews was encouraged by Nazi philosophy. Under the title Final Solution, SS and police officers implemented such a policy. German SS and police personnel executed mass shootings at numerous locations throughout seized Soviet territory, killing both men and women. Pregnant women and mothers of young were routinely classified as incapable of employment. During deportation operations, they were taken to execution sites, where camp administrators frequently put them in the initial waves of prisoners headed for the gas chambers. Orthodox Jewish mothers with young children were particularly at risk, since those dressed in Orthodox Jewish clothing were undoubtedly more likely to be discovered in hiding or to engage in particularly cruel behavior during pogrom-like actions. Orthodox families had more children than other families, which made the women in the households a particular target of Nazi ideology. Women who were not Jewish were also at risk. The Nazis massacred thousands of Gypsy women in the Auschwitz death camp, killed disabled women in the T4, and killed both men and women as partisans in numerous Soviet villages between 1943 and 1944. German authorities used women as forced labor in ghettos and concentration camps under conditions that frequently resulted in their deaths. Jewish and Gypsy women were utilized as test subjects for sterilization procedures and other immoral human experiments by German doctors and medical researchers. Women were particularly susceptible to physical abuse and rape in both the camps and the ghettos. Jewish women who were pregnant frequently tried to hide their pregnancies or were made to get abortions. Female deportees from Poland and the Soviet Union who were forced to work as slaves in the Reich were frequently raped, beaten, and coerced into having sex acts in exchange for food or other basic luxuries. Forcible Polish, Soviet, and Yugoslav laborers who had intercourse with the German men occasionally became pregnant. If so-called race experts decided that the child was not capable of Germanization, the women were typically forced to have abortions, sent to give birth in makeshift nurseries where the environments would ensure the death of the newborns, or simply sent back to the area they came from without nutrition or health care. A few concentration and labor camps were turned into brothels by the Germans. and the German army managed about 500 of them, forcing women to work in several of them. Several women detained in concentration camps established unofficial mutual assistance groups that helped each other survive by exchanging information, food, and clothing. Members of these groups frequently shared a common hometown or province, a comparable education background, training, or ties to their family. When the SS administrators assigned other women to detachments for housekeeping, cooking, laundry, and clothing repair, they were able to survive. However, women also contributed significantly to a number of resistance movements. Women who were active in socialist, communist, or Zionist youth organizations were particularly affected by this. Women in Poland carried information to the ghettos as messengers. Many women managed to flee and join the army rebel formations in the forest of East Poland and the Soviet Union. In the French resistance, the role of women was crucial. In February 1943, Sophie Scholl, a University of Munich student and a part of the White Rose resistance movement, was captured and shot to death for disseminating anti-Nazi pamphlets. Several women held positions of leadership or participated in ghetto resistance groups. In Bialystok, one of them was Heike Grossman. On the inside of the concentration camps, some people showed resistance. Alla Gertner, Regina Severstajan, Esther Wetschgelblum, Rosa Robata, and one anonymous woman, all Jewish women serving at the Vistula Union Metal Works detachment in Auschwitz I, had provided the gunpowder that participants of the Jewish Sonderkommando at the Auschwitz-Birkenau used to blast up the gas chamber and murder several SS men during a revolt in October 1944. In the assistance and rescue efforts for the Jews in German-occupied Europe, other women were involved. These included Zionist activist Gysi Fleischmann and German parachutist Hannes Seiden. The working group, under the direction of the Jewish Council in Bratislava, led by Fleischmann, made an effort to halt the expulsion of Jews from Slovakia. The harsh living circumstances and particularly the inadequate dietary intake in concentration camps undoubtedly accounted for the majority of the deaths. The Nazis employed a variety of methods in indirect execution in addition to this one, which had a peculiar status because, in order for death to occur by gas or phenol injection, there had to be a previous reasonable medical selection of prisoners deemed unfit by the Nazi system. This particular form of mass murder was carried out at Auschwitz, beginning in the spring of 1941 and continuing until April 1943 for non-Jewish captives or October 1944 for Jews. Selections might take place in the roll call area, but were frequently conducted in the camp's medical facility. According to Rudolf Haas, selections were made for prisoners whose performance at work was considered insufficient due to their health. Even though these methods used by the doctors in charge of the selection differed, physical activity was one of the tests used. Any vulnerability, no matter how little, might be fatal. Jewish women in Auschwitz were unquestionably constantly threatened with a choice that may end their lives. Many of those taken to Auschwitz and Birkenau were unable to survive for very long. In fact, frequent selections from among the critically ill women were made. Within a few seconds, during the roll call assemblies, SS doctors would decide whether a female prisoner would live or die. When she was deported in June 1942, Claudette Bloch witnessed that, during roll call, SS especially appointed for this task inspected us in minute details and took with them those women who looked too tired or ugly, those who had a pimple on their face, and more particularly, those with swollen legs. Women were often brought in their underwear to an open flat place. Block 25, often known as the antechamber of death, was made available to anyone who showed any signs of weakness or was unable to return to the camp in the evening. They were forced to return to the camp and run almost 10 meters through the camp gate. Also, those whose legs didn't withstand the exertion were chosen to be gassed. The procedures used by the doctors to select their victims did not differ based on sex. The lack of a gender distinction occasionally had unintended repercussions. Women were significantly less privileged than their fellow male prisoners when it came to sprinting. jumping, or conducting physical activities, making them even more vulnerable. In contrast to men, women had little opportunity to participate in any sport in their prior lives. So guys, that's pretty much of it. I hope you liked this video and found it interesting. But as we wrap up the video, we can't help but wonder that the women who survived this Holocaust, what type of psychological trauma they must have been through. Share your thoughts on this in the comments below. We will see you in the next video. Till then, take care.